Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Tea and Chat. My name's Philip and I'm one of the staff, the librarian at Salisbury Library. It's lovely to see you all today. My apologies for our technical problems yesterday. We've got it all sorted today. And thank you for joining us during this third lockdown. So the whole purpose of these Tea and Chats, if you haven't joined us before, is that we have some poetry and some prose. Hopefully something that will get you thinking or smiling, and that might be nice to listen to. I've also got a few book covers that I think might interest you, a programme recommendation and a couple of letters. So I've got a few natural history poems as we can only go out so far, or we can look in our back garden, so we thought we might share some of those. So the first poem I thought we'd try is The Snail by William Calper. Very intriguing creatures I find, especially when it rains a lot in the autumn, they all come out. So let's try The Snail by William Calper. To grass or leaf or fruit or wall, the snail sticks close nor fears to fall, as if he grew there, house and all together. Within that house secure he hides, when danger imminent betides, of storm, of other harm besides, of weather. Give but his horns the slightest touch, his self-collecting power is such, he shrinks into his house with much displeasure. Where'er he dwells alone, except himself has chattels none, while satisfied to be his own whole treasure. Thus hermit-like his life he leads, nor partner of his banquet needs, and if he meets one, only feeds the faster. Who seeks him must be worse than blind, he and his house are so combined, if finding it he fails to find his master. I think snails are great, in fact they carry around their houses all around, it's really lovely, isn't it? So that was The Snail by William Cowper. And the next one is about moor-hens. Now, I'm sure you know, but if you're not aware, so moor-hens are those birds you often see by the river in Salisbury with little red beaks, and they've got very long green toes that look ungainly and all over the place. And they walk around as if they own the river, which they probably do, and they have lots of odd names like across England, like Moggy Hen they're called, and Moran. And this poem is called Moor-Hens, and it's by Charles Causeley. Living by Bait Pond, they each spring and summer day watched among reed and frond the moor-hens prank and play. Watched them dip and dive, watched them pass, repass, spluttering over the water as if it were made of glass. Watched them gallop the mud, bobbing a tail ahead under an April stream, swimming with tails outspread. Listened at night for a cry, striking the sky like a stone, the keek of farewell as they drifted south for the sun. Whose are the children and who are the children who live by the pond? Summer and spring year long, when the wild sun shone, thirsty the stream and dry, and the house is gone. So whenever you're by a river or a pond in this country, you'll either see a moor-hen or a coot, and normally it's the moor-hen. So that poem I thought caught the spirit of the bird quite well. The next bird is the poem's called The Windhover, and that refers to the kestrel, and I'm sure some of you will, or many of you will have seen kestrels hovering away by main roads or motorways. They're often hovering around the roads that approach Stonehenge. That's a very good place to see them. So this poem is called The Windhover, and it's by Gerald, Manley-Hopkins. I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon, in his riding, of the rolling level underneath him steady air and striding. Hi there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing, in his ecstasy, then off, off forth on swing. As the skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend, the hurl and gliding rebuff the big wind. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Brute beauty and valour and act, O air, pride, plume, here, buckle, and the fire that breaks from thee then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. No wonder of it, sheer plod makes plough down Sicilian, shine and blue-beak embers are my dear, fall, gall themselves and gash gold vermilion. When I drive past a kestrel, it's quite hard not to be distracted and keep on driving because you're just admiring the way they manage to stay in the air so well. It's always very interesting. So the next poem, I'm going to flick onto it. Let's get the right page. Here we go. Is the Jenny Wren. And of course the Jenny Wren's that tiny little bird who flits around the garden, and this time of the year they often all roost together in nest boxes together to keep themselves warm because they're so tiny. And there's only thing that's more sweet than a Jenny Wren, and that's a baby wren, and they're even more incredible. If you've ever seen a baby wren, they're really lovely. And they've got a very unusual Latin name. They're called troglodytes. So I don't know if they are hermits, but they are very small and they're quite good. And this is by Walter de la Mare, and the poem's called Jenny Wren. Of all the birds that rove and sing, near dwellings made for men, none is so nimble, feet and trim as Jenny Wren. With pinpoint bill and tail a cock, so wildly shrill she cries, the echoes on their roof tree knock and fill the skies. Never was sweeter seraph hid within so small a house, a tiny inch-long, eager, ardent, feathered mouse. And the great thing about wrens is they're so loud and they're hidden away in the bush. It's incredible that such a loud noise comes from such a small bird. So that's Jenny Wren by Walter de la Mare. Now, we haven't had this before on Tea and Chat, but I thought we'd have a couple of letters. And these are letters from Arthur Conan Doyle. And of course, in times past, letter writing was a big thing to the papers. And he writes a whole range of letters on a variety of subjects, but this one is about shop assistants. And I thought it was particularly timely with the pressure that lots of people are under now, people in shops especially. People in lots of services are under strain at the moment, but people in shops are being approached in difficult circumstances sometimes and having to deal with customers who may or may not want to wear a mask or abide to the rules. So this is Arthur Conan Doyle's letter about a grocer's assistant, and this was written in January 1901. And he says, "Sir, I have a very strong opinion, which I expressed when I was a candidate for Parliament, that shop assistants, both male and female, are much too hard worked. In some trades, and the grocers particular, it is my opinion a crying evil. I should like to see a bill passed by which a 2/3 majority of any trade would compel every shop to shut at reasonable hours. It is a national question, for surely it is of great importance to the nation that so many young men and young women should have time to improve their physical health and to cultivate their minds. The inconvenience to the customer in shopping an hour or two earlier is nothing when compared to the welfare of so many thousands. Your organisation has therefore my heartfelt sympathy." As you can see, I don't think Arthur Conan Doyle would have been particularly in favour of Sunday trading, but it's interesting that he writes about that particular subject. Obviously, of course, he felt strongly about. Another letter he wrote, and this was to the Daily Chronicle, was about a book called Esther Waters and the Libraries. And Esther Waters was a novel that came out in 1894 by George Moore. And it was controversial at the time because it was about what the Victorians called at the time, in inverted commas, a fallen woman. So you can probably ascertain from that what the subject matter of the book was. And this involves libraries, but not public libraries. This involves W.H. Smith libraries, and I'm sure many of you know that W.H. Smith and Boots in the 19th century and even into the early 20th century had circulating libraries, and I think Salisbury had a Boots circulating library. And this letter is about censorship, and it's about this book being taken away from W.H. Smith's shelves. And of course we have the same debate going on today with Twitter, so the terms of the debate don't change, it's just a different format. So this letter is entitled Esther Waters and the Libraries. Whatever action the Society of Authors may take on the question of the exclusion of Esther Waters from the railway bookstores, it is, I think, the duty of every newspaper which has the interests of literature at heart to comment upon it. It may be argued that Messrs. W.H. Smith and Son are a private firm and may do what they like in the matter. As a matter of fact, however, through the huge monopoly which they hold, the firm is practically a public institution, and that is far too great a thing to be managed upon lines of individual caprice or intolerance. A huge power rests in their hands. Exclusion from their stalls and their library means the work is cut off at the metre as far as the country consumer goes. Such a power must be used with forbearance, otherwise it becomes unfair both to the author and to his public. Esther Waters is, in my opinion, a great and very serious book. It is great because it draws many aspects of life, and every one of them with an attention to detail and the thoroughness of workmanship which put the book on the very highest plane of fiction. It is serious because it deals with a succession of vital questions, and because the most frivolous reader cannot fail to have his conscience touched by it, to have it brought home to him that humble tragedies surround him on all sides, and that he may not have to go further than in his own kitchen to find a field for his benevolence. It is the greatest sermon against gambling that has ever been preached, and through in the course of the story it deals with matter which, if coarsely treated, would become objectionable. I do not think that any literary critic would accuse Mr. Moore of bad taste. To draw vice is one thing, and to make it attractive is another. On what ground, then, can Messrs. Smith and Son inflict so serious an injury upon this author and his book as to exclude it from a large share of its natural market? The obvious duty of a distributing house is to distribute, and not to act as an illegal and unauthorised censor upon literature. It may seem to their advisers immoral to draw certain sides of life, but to many others it seems equally immoral that a great branch of literature should be devoted entirely to frivolity. If the book is objectionable, there are recognised means for suppressing it, but both authors and public have a right to complain of a monopoly being used in such a fashion that it becomes a law within the law. Esther Waters is a good book, good both in literature and in ethics, and if it is to be placed outside the pale of legitimate fiction, it's difficult to say how any true and serious work is to be done within it. Yours faithfully, Arthur Conan Doyle. And he wrote that from the Reform Club, April 30th, 1894. So I thought it was interesting because much of those debates go on today and they carried on throughout the 20th century, things like Lady Chatterley's Lover, and they carry on today in the 21st century. So some things never change. And if you want to find out about Esther Waters and the book, you can go online and read the book, and various sites will have it, and I'll put up more details at the end of this session. Okay, so back to some poems, back to some wildlife poems. It was a long time away since we saw any flies, but this poem is about the fly, and it's by William Blake. Little fly, thy summer's play, my thoughtless hand has brushed away. Am not I a fly like thee, or art not thou a man like me? For I dance and drink and sing, till some blind hand shall brush my ring. If thought is life and strength and breath, and the want of the thought is death, then am I a happy fly, if I live or if I die. That's The Fly by William Blake. The next one will make you think of summer especially. And it's to a skylark, those lovely birds that fly so high in the sky and you can barely see them singing away. So this is a Skylark by Percy Shelley. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert, that from heaven or near it pourest thy full heart, in profuse strains of unpremeditated art. Higher still and higher from the earth thou springest, like a cloud of fire, the blue deep thou wingest, and singing still doth soar, and soaring ever singest. That was a Skylark by Percy by Shelley. Okay, so something, we always like a bit of humour and tea and chat. We always like a bit of Edward Lear. So here is There Was an Old Man in a Tree. There was an old man in a tree who was horribly bored by a bee. When they asked, does it buzz? He replied, yes it does. It's a regular brute of a bee. Can't beat a bit of Edward Lear, can you? Thank you, Rebecca. I'm glad you liked that poem. Okay, so what have we got next? Oh yes, we've got something a bit seasonal now. Let's get the other book. We might get some of this in the next couple of weeks, you never know. I know some people love it and some people hate it, but here we go. So it's by Edward Thomas and it's called Snow. In the gloom of whiteness, in the great silence of snow, a child was sighing and bitterly saying, oh, they have killed a white bird up there on her nest. The down is fluttering from her breast. And still it fell through that dusky brightness on the child crying for the bird of the snow. Bit of misunderstanding there, I think, but lovely poem all the same, the poor child. Okay, so that was Snow by Edward Thomas. Okay, so I thought I might tell you at this point about a few of our book chat groups. So we've got book chat groups all over the county. We've got a Salisbury and Wilton book chat group. We've got a Warminster and Mere book chat group. We've got one at Chippenham, one at Melksham, one at Calm. I think there's one at Causeley as well, and one at Westbury. And these groups are informal groups where people can talk about their favourite books, or they can talk about their favourite authors. We talk about libraries. We talk about comic book characters. We talk about lots of fun things, and they're quite they're nice little groups that people join and share their knowledge. And recently, the Wilton and Mere book chat group have been talking about weird book titles, and there's a fantastic couple of posts that have gone up, and some of the book titles on there included Cheese Rolling in Gloucester, How to Make Your Own Dried Apple Dolls, Extreme Ironing, with a picture of someone ironing on a cliff top, the Pop-Up Book of Phobias was another one. So there's all these weird and wonderful book titles, and every one of these book chat groups has a lot of debate and a lot of different suggestions. There's also authors' birthdays celebrated on them. There's new book prizes that we mention. Everything, it's all about discussion of books, literature and libraries. So I'd recommend joining one of those book groups. The local one for us is the Salisbury and Wilton Library book chat group. That's always worth a look. There are also posts on things like mental health and well-being. There's online arts courses, and there's books that people have received at Christmas. So they're always worth looking at. Okay, so I've got a couple more poems to finish with, and they're by Thomas Hood. Thomas Hood was a Victorian, very prolific Victorian poet, in the early 19th century. He had a bit of a tumultuous upbringing. He lost both his parents relatively early on. His father was a bookseller in the book trade, and like a lot of people at that time, his living was very precarious as a writer, up and down all over the place. But there's some wonderful poems that he left behind, and this one is a ballad about the faithless Sally Brown. So Faithless Sally Brown by Thomas Hood. Young Ben, he was a nice young man, a carpenter by trade, and he fell in love with Sally Brown, that was a lady's maid. But as they fetched a walk one day, they met a press gang crew, and Sally she did faint away, whilst Ben he was brought to. The boatswain swore with wicked words, enough to shock a saint, that though she did seem in a fit, 'twas nothing but a faint. Come, girl, said he, hold up your head, he'll be as good as me, for when your swain is in our boat, a boatswain he will be. So when they'd made their game of her, and taken off her outf, she roused and found she only was a-coming to herself. And is he gone, and is he gone, she cried and wept upright, then I will to the waterside, and see him out of sight. A waterman came up to her, now young woman, said he, if you weep on so, you will make eye water in the sea. Alas, they've taken my beau Ben to sail with old Ben Bow, and her woe began to run afresh, as if she'd said, gee woe. Says he, they've only taken him to the tender ship, you see. The tender ship, cried Sally Brown, what a hardship that must be. Oh, would I were a mermaid now, for then I'd follow him. But oh, I'm not a fisherwoman, and so I cannot swim. Alas, I was not born beneath the Virgin and the Scales, so I must curse my cruel stars and walk about in Wales. Now Ben had sailed to many a place that's underneath the world, but in 2 years the ship came home, and all her sails were furled. But when he called on Sally Brown to see how she went on, he'd found she got another Ben, whose Christian name was John. Oh, Sally Brown, how could you serve me so? I've met with many a breeze before, but never such a blow. Then reading on his bacco box, he heaved a bitter sigh, and then he began to eye his pipe, and then to pipe his eye. And then he tried to sing all's well, but could not though he tried. His head was turned, and so he chewed as his pigtail till he died. His death, which happened in his birth, at 40 odd befell, they went and told the sexton, and the sexton told the bell. That was a bit of a sad ending, wasn't it? But it was quite quite a tale, that was. It obviously went off to sail and came back, and his beloved had disappeared. Never mind, but it was quite a lovely poem, I thought. And I thought we'd end with another poem by Thomas Hood, and this, appropriately enough, is called Bedtime. The evening is coming, the sun sinks to rest, the rooks are all flying straight home to their nest. "Caw," says the rook as he flies overhead, "it's time, little people, we're going to bed. The flowers are closing, the daisies asleep, the primrose is buried in slumber so deep. Shut up for the night is the pimpernel red, it's time, little people, we're going to bed. The butterfly drowsy has folded its wing, the bees are returning, no more the birds sing. Their labour is over, their nestlings are fed, it's time, little people, we're going to bed. Here comes the pony, his work is all done, down through the meadow he takes a good run. Up go his heels and down goes his head, it's time, little people, we're going to bed. Good night, little people, good night and good night, sweet dreams to your eyelids till dawning of light. The evening is come, there's no more to be said, it's time, little people, we're going to bed. Well, Thomas, I don't know about your house, but often our smaller people have quite a lot of trouble going to bed. But I thought that was a lovely poem. So I just wanted to finish off with a programme recommendation for you that involves poetry. There's a nice little series that's just started on BBC4, and it's called Winter Walks, and it involves some celebrities who go for a walk around the Yorkshire Dales. The first one is with Selina Scott. She's in Wharfdale, and the scenery is beautiful. It was all done before lockdown. Not only is there beautiful scenery and walking, there's also some poetry as well. You read some poetry. Leisure was one of the poems that they read the other day. Other people involved include the Reverend Richard Coles. So I think there's about 5 programmes, and they're all around Yorkshire, and they're on BBC4. Well, I hope you enjoyed sharing a tea and chat with me this afternoon. I've certainly enjoyed putting it together. Steph will be here in 2 weeks' time on the Tuesday, 2 weeks on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and then Basil will be here on another 2 weeks. And if you're not so keen on my voice, you can always go back and listen on the Melksham Library Facebook page or the Trowbridge Library Facebook page to Basil and Steph. So in the meantime, I'd like you to please keep well and keep safe. And if you do really want to feel you need to get out and you need some books, then we do have an order and collect service at our larger libraries. But obviously, you need to think about it very carefully about when you're going out at the moment. But we hope you can join us soon for another tea and chat session. And thank you for your lovely comments along the bottom. Thank you.